For more than 2,000 years, Zen masters have understood something remarkable about peace. It isn't something we create through effort or achieve through perfection, but something that emerges naturally when we see clearly what's already here. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. These Buddhist stories are not lessons to memorize or techniques to master, but gentle invitations to recognize what you've always known in the deepest part of yourself. You don't need to understand everything perfectly. You don't need to remember every detail. Simply let these stories wash over you like gentle rain. Let your body settle deeper into rest. Relax. Take a slow, deep breath, and let's begin our journey together. The morning air was cool when Daichi left the monastery grounds. He was a young monk, barely 20, with questions that kept him awake more nights than he cared to admit. His teacher had given him simple instruction: walk to the summit of Mount Koya and sit until you understand. Daichi had packed only what he needed. A wooden staff worn smooth by countless hands before his. A small bag with rice and tea. A wool blanket. The path ahead was known to be difficult, but he welcomed the challenge. Perhaps physical effort would quiet the restlessness in his mind. The first part of the trail was gentle, winding through cedar forests where morning light filtered green through the canopy. Birds called to each other in languages Daichi didn't understand, but somehow felt he knew. His feet found their rhythm on the dirt path. Then the rocks began. Slick with moss and morning dew, they turned each step into a small negotiation. Daichi felt his jaw clench with concentration. One foot, then the other. Test the surface before trusting your weight. His staff became not decoration, but necessity. After the rocks came the roots. Someone, sometime long ago, had called this section the tangle. Daichi understood why. Ancient trees had woven their roots across and through the path like a test, designed specifically to frustrate travelers. He caught his foot more than once, stumbling forward, barely catching himself. Strange thing, though. Each time he stumbled, each time he had to slow down and really look at where to place his next step, he felt something shift inside. The frustration he expected didn't come. Instead, a curious kind of energy rose in his chest. These obstacles weren't punishing him. They were teaching him something. Patience, maybe. Attention. Presence. The thought surprised him so much, he stopped walking entirely. He stood there in the middle of the tangle, staff in hand, and laughed out loud. The sound echoed off the mountainside and came back to him changed, like the mountain was laughing too. By the time Daichi reached the summit, the sun had climbed to its highest point. He found a flat stone, broad and smooth, that seemed to have been waiting for someone exactly his size to sit on it. The view stretched in every direction. Villages looked like scattered rice grains. Rivers were silver threads. Clouds moved below him, not above. He Saturday. Closed his eyes. Breathed the thin mountain air that smelled of pine and stone, and something else he couldn't name. Clean, maybe. Ancient. At first his mind did what it always did. Jump from thought to thought like a monkey in branches. What time is it? Did I bring enough water? What will I tell my teacher when I return? That itch on my ankle, should I scratch it? But slowly, without him forcing anything, the thoughts began to space themselves out. Like ripples on a pond growing farther apart. Between the thoughts, something else appeared. Not emptiness exactly. More like a presence that had been there all along, just hidden beneath the noise. The mountain was teaching him without words. This stone beneath him had sat here for how long? Thousands of years? Millions? Weather had come and gone. Storms had raged. Seasons had turned. And the mountain had remained exactly what it was. Not fighting the wind. Not resisting the rain. Simply being mountain. Daiichi opened his eyes. The clouds below had shifted, creating new patterns. Everything was moving, changing, flowing. Yet the mountain stayed steady. He felt himself settling into that same quality. Not the changing weather of thoughts and moods, but the mountain beneath it all. The stillness that holds everything without being moved by any of it. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Daiichi felt complete. Like a small note in a vast symphony that had been playing long before he was born and would continue long after he was gone. The feeling wasn't grand or dramatic. It was quiet, solid, true. He didn't know how much time passed. The light changed from afternoon gold to evening amber. He heard footsteps on the trail behind him and turned to see an old man approaching. A shepherd, from the looks of it, with a walking stick and a small flock of sheep following at a distance. The shepherd stopped when he saw Daiichi. Something in the young monk's face must have caught his attention because he studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You look different than most people do when they come up here," the shepherd said. His voice was rough from years of wind and weather. Most arrive restless and leave the same way. "You look like you found something." Daiichi smiled. "I think the mountain showed me something I'd been missing." "The mountain is a good teacher," the shepherd agreed. He gestured to a nearby rock. "May I sit for a moment? My legs aren't what they used to be." "Please," Daiichi said. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the light fade across the valley below. The shepherd's sheep grazed on the sparse grass, their bells making small music in the evening air. Finally, the shepherd spoke again. "What did the mountain teach you?" Daiichi took a breath, trying to find words for something that lived beyond language. "It taught me about peace. Not the kind that comes and goes depending on circumstances. Something deeper, like the mountain itself. It doesn't matter if the weather is calm or stormy. The mountain remains mountain. Steady, unchanging, complete." The shepherd nodded slowly. "And you felt this peace yourself?" "I felt it was already here," Daiichi said. "I just had to stop looking for it long enough to notice. It's like it's been here all along, beneath everything else. Beneath my thoughts and worries and questions. Just here. Solid. Real." "That's a good discovery," the shepherd said quietly. "Can I ask you something?" Daiichi said. "How does someone find this kind of peace in regular life? Down there, where things are complicated and noisy and constantly demanding attention." The shepherd smiled, the kind of smile that comes from long experience. "You know what I've learned from 40 years of bringing sheep to this mountain? That peace isn't about your circumstances being perfect. It's about finding the mountain inside yourself. The part that stays steady, no matter what weather comes through." He gestured to the landscape around them. "This mountain will be here tomorrow and next year and 100 years from now. Storms will come. Seasons will change. None of it will move the mountain from being what it is. You have that same quality inside you. You felt it today, didn't you? Daichi nodded. That's all you need, the shepherd continued. You felt it once. Now you know it's there. That knowing changes everything. You don't have to stay on this mountain to have access to that peace. The mountain inside you goes wherever you go. They sat together until the first stars appeared. Then the shepherd stood, gathering his walking stick. I should get the flock down before full dark. But thank you for sitting with me. It's not often I meet someone who understands what this mountain offers. Thank you, Daichi said, for helping me see it more clearly. The shepherd nodded and turned to go. Then he paused and looked back. One more thing. The path you climbed today with all those obstacles, the slippery rocks, the tangled roots, you probably thought they were in your way. But they weren't, were they? No, Daichi said, understanding. They were the way. Exactly, the shepherd said. Remember that when life gets difficult, the obstacles aren't blocking your path to peace. They're showing you where to find it. Daichi watched the old man disappear down the trail, his sheep following in a loose line. Then he turned back to the view one more time. The valley below was settling into darkness, small lights beginning to appear in the villages. The sky above was filling with stars. He stood and began gathering his things. The descent would be slower in the fading light, but he didn't mind. He had nowhere to be except here, taking each step as it came. When Daichi returned to the monastery 2 days later, his teacher took one look at him and smiled. No words were needed. The mountain had taught what words never could. This story touches something essential about the nature of peace. Daichi's journey wasn't about reaching a destination or achieving a special state. It was about discovering what had been true all along, just hidden beneath the surface of his restless searching. The mountain taught through its simple existence. It didn't perform or prove anything. It just was what it was, completely and without question. And in that steady presence, Daichi could feel his own steady presence beneath all the mental noise he usually identified as himself. This is what Zen Buddhism points to when it speaks of peace that surpasses understanding. Not a peace that depends on perfect circumstances or the absence of challenges. A peace that exists independent of conditions, like bedrock beneath shifting soil. It's always there, always solid, always available. We just forget to notice it. The obstacles Daichi encountered on his climb reveal something important about how we find this peace. The slippery rocks and tangled roots weren't preventing him from reaching understanding. They were the very means by which understanding arrived. Each challenge demanded his full attention, pulled him out of his usual mental patterns, showed him what it means to be completely present with what is. How often do we treat our life challenges as obstacles to peace rather than invitations toward it? We think peace will come when the difficult thing is resolved, when the problem is solved, when circumstances finally align the way we want them to. But the shepherd's wisdom cuts through this misunderstanding. The obstacles aren't in the way. They are the way. This doesn't mean we should seek out suffering or pretend that difficulties don't hurt. It means we can stop waiting for perfect conditions before we access the peace that's already present. Right now, beneath whatever challenges you're facing, there's a quality of awareness that remains steady. like the mountain watching storms pass over its surface without being disturbed by them. Daichi's realization that he felt like a small note in a vast symphony points to another aspect of this teaching. When we touch this deeper peace, we often feel ourselves as part of something much larger than our individual concerns. Not in a way that makes us insignificant, but in a way that puts our struggles in perspective. We're one wave in an ocean, one breath in an endless rhythm, one moment in an eternal present. The shepherd understood this from his years of daily practice. 40 years of climbing the same mountain, watching the same seasons turn, tending the same work, he learned that peace isn't exotic or dramatic. It's ordinary in the most profound way. Available right here in the simple fact of being alive and aware. When he told Daichi that the mountain inside you goes wherever you go, he was offering a key teaching of Zen. External circumstances change constantly. Moods shift. Situations evolve. But the awareness that witnesses all of it remains constant. This awareness is your inner mountain. It doesn't depend on anything outside itself to be what it is. Finding this inner mountain isn't about effort or achievement. It's about recognition. Like Daichi sitting on that summit stone, you can pause long enough to notice what's already here beneath your busy thoughts. The noticing itself is enough. Once you've felt it even once, you know it exists. That knowing changes everything. It doesn't matter how choppy your thoughts are or how unsettled you might feel. The mountain doesn't require your thoughts to be calm. It remains steady regardless. When you recognize this, even for a moment, you touch the same peace Daichi discovered. Not because you've achieved something special, but because you've stopped long enough to see what was always true. The obstacles you face today served the same purpose as those slippery rocks on Daichi's path. They asked for your attention. They demanded your presence. In doing so, they offered an invitation to find the steady awareness that can meet any challenge without losing itself. This peace is your birthright, not your achievement. It's been here your whole life, as close as your breath, as constant as your heartbeat. The only question is whether you're willing to pause and recognize it beneath the noise of your busy mind. The monastery was small, tucked into a hillside where morning fog gathered thick as cotton. Kenzo had been walking for 3 days when he found it, though finding wasn't quite the right word. More like the monastery had been waiting for him to arrive. The path up was narrow, barely wide enough for one person. Pine trees crowded close on both sides, their roots breaking through the earth to create natural steps worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. Kenzo climbed slowly, breathing the thin air that smelled of pine needles and damp stone. That's when he saw it. Just off the main path, almost hidden by a curtain of hanging moss and twisted vines, an opening in the rock face caught his eye. A cave. Not large, not dramatic, but something about it made him stop walking. He stood there for a long moment, feeling pulled toward it in a way he couldn't explain. The monastery was still another half-hour's climb above him. He could hear water running somewhere nearby, probably a stream, though he couldn't see it through the trees. Kenzo looked around. No one else on the path. The morning was completely still, except for bird calls echoing through the forest. He stepped off the trail and pushed through the vines. They were wet from the fog, cold against his hands and face. The cave entrance was smaller than it had looked from the path. He had to duck his head and turn sideways to fit through. Inside, the temperature dropped immediately. Cool stone air, untouched by sunlight, for who knows how long. He'd brought a small lantern, more from habit than planning. Now he was grateful for it. He lit it with hands that shook slightly, though whether from cold or something else, he wasn't sure. The flame revealed walls of smooth rock that seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The cave wasn't deep, maybe 15 feet from entrance to back wall. But it opened up inside, creating a space that felt much larger than its actual size. The ceiling rose in a natural dome. Someone, sometime, had placed a flat stone in the center of the floor, the perfect height and size for sitting. Kenzo set his lantern on a small ledge in the rock and lowered himself onto the stone seat. The cold from it seeped through his clothes immediately. He could see his breath in small clouds that disappeared into the darkness beyond the lantern's reach. He didn't know why he was here exactly. Didn't know what he expected to find. But something in the quality of the silence made him want to stay. He closed his eyes and let his breathing slow. The silence was complete. Not just the absence of sound, but a presence of its own. Heavy. Deep. Like the silence had weight and texture. It pressed against his ears, his skin, his thoughts. At first, his mind did what it always did. Thoughts appeared one after another. What time is it? Should I continue to the monastery? What if someone sees my pack on the trail and thinks I've fallen? The usual stream of mental chatter that filled most of his waking hours. But slowly, something began to shift. In the deep silence of the cave, with nothing to distract him and nowhere to go, the thoughts started to seem less urgent. They kept coming, but they had less power somehow. Like clouds passing across a sky without blocking the sunday. Beneath the thoughts, he became aware of something else. A quality of presence that had always been here, but that he'd never really noticed before. Not a thing exactly, but a space. An openness. Like the cave itself, but inside him. Kenzo sat with this for a long time. The lantern flame burned steady. His breathing settled into a rhythm so slow, he almost forgot he was breathing at all. And in that stillness, layers began to peel away. Layers he hadn't known he was carrying. The person he thought he should be. The mistakes he kept rehearsing. The future he was trying to control. All of it felt suddenly transparent, like thin paper held up to light. And beneath it all was something simpler. Just this. Just being here. Just awareness itself, clear and quiet and complete. When he finally opened his eyes, the lantern had burned lower, but was still giving enough light to see by. The cave looked the same, but he felt different. Like he'd found something he'd been missing his whole life without knowing what it was. A sound at the cave entrance made him turn. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the grey daylight. As Kenzo's eyes adjusted, he saw it was a shepherd, breathing hard, looking worried. "Excuse me," the shepherd said. His voice broke the silence like a stone dropped in still water. "I'm sorry to disturb you. I've lost one of my sheep and I thought perhaps she wandered in here." Kenzo smiled, feeling completely at ease despite the interruption. "No sheep here. Just me." The shepherd stepped inside, looking around. "I've been searching all morning. She's young, tends to wander." He paused, really looking at Kenzo for the first time. "You seem very calm for someone sitting alone in a dark cave." "It's peaceful here," Kenzo said simply. I suppose it is, the shepherd agreed. He was older, maybe 60, with weathered hands and kind eyes. Though I've never understood people who seek out caves and mountains for peace. Seems like peace should be easier to find than that. Maybe, Kenzo said. But this cave showed me something I'd been missing. What's that? Kenzo considered how to put it into words. That the peace I was searching for wasn't something I needed to find. It was something I needed to stop covering up with all my noise and worry. The shepherd nodded slowly, like he understood more than the words themselves. That's a good discovery. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, "Can I sit for a moment? My old legs need a rest." "Please," Kenzo said, gesturing to the stone floor. The shepherd lowered himself with a grunt and sat with his back against the cave wall. They stayed in silence for a while. Not uncomfortable silence, but the kind that feels natural between two people who don't need to fill every moment with talk. Finally, the shepherd spoke. "I've walked past this cave 100 times, probably more. Never stopped to go inside. What made you enter?" "I don't know exactly," Kenzo admitted. "I just felt drawn to it. Like it was calling to me somehow." "Calling you to find peace?" "Calling me to find myself," Kenzo said, surprising himself with the words. But they were true. To find a place inside me that's quiet. A place I can return to when everything else gets too loud. The shepherd smiled. My wife used to talk about something like that. She called it her heart's home. A place inside herself where she could go to just be. No demands, no expectations, no performing. Just being exactly who she was. "That's it exactly," Kenzo said. "This cave is like that. A heart's home. It doesn't give you anything new. It just gets quiet enough that you can hear what was already there." They sat together in the gentle darkness. The lantern flame cast moving shadows on the cave walls. Outside, birds called back and forth in conversation only they understood. "I should keep looking for my sheep," the shepherd said eventually. But he didn't move right away. "Though I have a feeling I found something more valuable than a lost animal. Thank you for sharing your cave with me." "It's not my cave," Kenzo said. "It belongs to whoever needs it." The shepherd stood, brushing dust from his pants. "You know what I think? I think everyone has a cave like this inside them. A sacred space where they can meet themselves without all the noise of the world pushing in. Most people just never slow down long enough to find it." Kenzo felt the truth of those words settle into him. "You're right. And once you find it, once you know it's there, you can return to it anytime. Even in the middle of crowds or noise or difficulty." "Especially then," the shepherd agreed. He moved toward the entrance, then paused and looked back. "I hope you find what you're looking for, young man. Though it seems to me you might have already found it." After the shepherd left, Kenzo sat alone for a while longer. But it felt different now. Not lonely or searching. Just present. Just here. Just at home in himself, in a way he'd never quite felt before. When he finally emerged from the cave, blinking in the afternoon sunlight, he looked up at the monastery on the hill above. He could continue climbing if he wanted, or he could turn back down the mountain. Either way felt right because he'd already found what he came for. He chose to descend. and as he walked, he practiced carrying the cave's silence with him, returning his attention to that quiet center whenever his thoughts started to race. It wasn't perfect. His mind wandered constantly, but each time he noticed it wandering, he could bring it back to the sacred space inside himself that no one could take away. Kenzo's discovery in the cave reveals something essential about the spiritual journey. We often think we need to travel somewhere, do something, become someone different before we can access peace. But the cave taught him that what he was searching for was never distant. It was inside him all along, waiting to be recognized. The heart's cave is a beautiful metaphor for what exists in each of us. A place of natural quiet beneath all our mental noise. A sacred space where we can meet ourselves without judgment or performance. Not a place we create through effort, but a place we uncover by removing what obscures it. Notice how the cave didn't give Kenzo anything new. It simply provided conditions quiet enough that he could hear what had been true all along. This is the power of stillness, of silence, of creating space for awareness to recognize itself. In that recognition, layers begin to fall away naturally. Not through force or discipline, but through simple seeing. The thoughts that usually dominate our attention start to lose their grip when we stop feeding them constant energy. They keep appearing, but we begin to notice the space between them. The awareness that watches them come and go. This awareness is like the cave itself, steady and unchanging while everything else moves through it. When Kenzo described the layers peeling away, the person he thought he should be, the mistakes he kept rehearsing, the future he was trying to control, he was pointing to something we all carry. These mental constructs feel so solid, so real, so much a part of who we are. But in deep stillness, their transparent nature becomes obvious. They're just thoughts, just stories, not the fundamental truth of what we are. The shepherd's arrival demonstrates something important about this inner sanctuary. True peace isn't fragile. It doesn't shatter the moment someone interrupts us or circumstances change. Kenzo could welcome the shepherd's presence without losing his center because he'd touched something deeper than temporary tranquility. He'd found what the shepherd's wife called her heart's home. This idea of a heart's home is worth sitting with. A place inside yourself where you can simply be. No demands pulling at you. No expectations to meet. No roles to perform. Just the simple fact of your own existence exactly as it is. This place isn't something you have to earn or deserve. It's your birthright as a conscious being. The shepherd's wisdom that everyone has a cave like this inside them points to a universal truth. Whether we call it awareness, presence, original nature, or the heart's cave, we all have access to this quality of being. The only question is whether we take time to discover it. Most of us move through life so quickly, with so much noise and distraction, that we never encounter the silence beneath it all. We fill every moment with activity, entertainment, information, stimulation. Not because we love the noise, but because we're afraid of what we might find in the quiet. But what Kenzo discovered is what anyone finds who dares to get truly quiet. The silence isn't empty or lonely or frightening. It's full of presence, of peace, of a quality of being that feels more real than all our mental constructions about reality. When he learned he could carry this silence with him, returning to it even in the middle of daily life, he understood the practical application of his cave experience. You don't have to live in a monastery or sit in caves to access this inner sanctuary. You just have to remember it exists and practice returning to it. This returning is the essence of mindfulness practice in Zen Buddhism. Not achieving some special state, but repeatedly coming back to the simple awareness that's always here. Your mind will wander. That's what minds do. The practice is noticing when you've wandered and gently returning home. Home to the cave inside your heart. Home to the awareness that watches thoughts without being defined by them. Home to the peace that doesn't depend on circumstances being any particular way. This presence is your heart's cave. It's always available as a refuge from the noise of the world and the chatter of your mind. You don't have to travel anywhere to find it. You don't have to become someone different to deserve it. You just have to pause long enough to notice it's already here. The sacred space inside you doesn't require maintenance or protection. It can't be damaged by your mistakes or diminished by your struggles. It's the ground of your being, as constant and reliable as the earth beneath your feet. When you remember to return to it, you come home to yourself in the deepest sense. Tonight, as sleep approaches, let yourself sink into this inner cave. Let the silence hold you the way the stone cave held Kenzo. Trust that beneath all the movement and change of your life, there's a stillness that knows you completely and accepts you exactly as you are. The monastery sat in a valley where bamboo grew so thick it formed walls of green on 3 sides. Ren had lived there for 2 years, studying texts and practicing meditation with the other monks. He was dedicated, serious about his training. But lately he'd been feeling rigid, brittle, like something in him might snap under pressure. His teacher, Master Sato, had noticed. After morning meditation one day, he called Ren aside. "You're trying too hard," Master Sato said. His voice was gentle but direct. "Go walk in the bamboo forest. Watch how the bamboo moves. Learn from it." Ren bowed and left, though he wasn't sure what bamboo could teach him that years of study hadn't already revealed. Still, he trusted his teacher's wisdom, even when he didn't understand it. The path into the bamboo forest was well worn, used by monks for centuries. As soon as Ren stepped under the canopy of green, the quality of light changed. Softer, filtered through thousands of leaves that rustled in the breeze. He walked slowly, letting his eyes adjust. The bamboo stalks rose like pillars in a natural temple, each one perfectly vertical, perfectly balanced. Their leaves created patterns of shadow and light that moved constantly across the ground. A gust of wind came through, stronger than before. Ren stopped walking and watched what happened. The bamboo bent. Not just a little, but deeply, dramatically. The stalks curved like bows, their tops sweeping through arcs that seemed impossible without breaking. The whole forest became a dance of movement, every stalk swaying in rhythm with the wind. Then the gust passed. And just as smoothly, just as naturally, the bamboo returned to vertical. Perfectly upright again, as if nothing had happened. Ren stood very still, watching this happen again and again. Each time the wind came, the bamboo bent. Each time the wind passed, the bamboo returned. Never fighting, never resisting, just moving with what came and then returning to center. He walked deeper into the forest until he found a small clearing where a flat stone offered a place to sit. He settled there, cross-legged, watching the bamboo continue its dance around him. The stalks were strong, he could see that. Their walls were thick, their structure solid, but they weren't rigid. They had this quality of give, of flexibility that allowed them to bend without breaking. And the more he watched, the more he understood why. The roots. He could see them at the base of each stalk, gripping the earth with fierce determination. Spreading wide and deep, anchoring the bamboo so completely that it could afford to be flexible above ground. The strength wasn't in refusing to bend. The strength was in being rooted enough to bend and return. Ren sat with this for a long time. The wind came and went. The bamboo danced and settled. And gradually, something in his own chest began to loosen. All this time he'd been trying to be like the old oak trees he'd seen in the mountains. Massive, solid, unmovable. He'd thought that's what spiritual practice required. But those oak trees, for all their size and strength, could be toppled by severe enough storms. He'd seen it happen. Their very rigidity made them vulnerable. They couldn't bend, so eventually something broke. The bamboo was showing him a different way. Not weaker, but stronger in a way he was just beginning to understand. Flexible enough to move with life's changes, while staying rooted in something essential that didn't change. He was so absorbed in watching the bamboo that he didn't hear the farmer approach until the man spoke. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Ren looked up to see an older man, maybe 70, with a bamboo basket on his back and weathered hands that spoke of decades of work. The farmer smiled at him with genuine warmth. "I hope I'm not disturbing your meditation," the farmer said. "I come here to gather bamboo shoots for my evening meal. This forest has fed my family for 3 generations. "Please," Ren said, gesturing that he was welcome. "I'm just watching and learning." The farmer set down his basket and stretched his back. "Learning from the bamboo? That's wise. It's one of the best teachers in this valley. What has it taught you?" Ren asked. The farmer considered this, looking up at the swaying stalks above them. "It taught me how to survive hard times. How to bend when life pushes hard without losing myself. How to be strong and flexible at the same time." He knelt down, touching the base of a bamboo stalk with obvious affection. "See these roots? They go deep and spread wide. That's what allows the bamboo to bend so far without breaking. It knows who it is. It knows where it's planted. That knowing gives it freedom to move." "I've been trying to be rigid," Ren admitted, thinking that's what strength means. "But watching the bamboo, I see I was wrong." The farmer nodded. "Rigid things break. Flexible things bend and return. That's not just true of bamboo. It's true of people too. The ones who survive the hardest storms aren't the ones who refuse to bend. They're the ones who know how to move with the force and then come back to center." He stood and picked up his basket again. "There's something else the bamboo taught me. It doesn't just survive storms. It thrives. Even in conditions where other plants would struggle, bamboo finds a way to grow. That's because it's not wasting energy fighting against what is. It's using that energy to adapt and flourish." Ren felt these words land deep in his chest. How much energy had he been wasting trying to control things he couldn't control? Trying to make himself into some ideal image of what a monk should be? Fighting against his own nature instead of working with it? "Thank you," Ren said. You've helped me understand what I came here to learn." The farmer smiled. "I didn't teach you anything. The bamboo did. I just reminded you to pay attention." He bowed slightly and moved off into the forest, gathering shoots with practiced efficiency. Ren stayed in the clearing until evening began to darken the sky. When he finally rose to return to the monastery, he felt different. Lighter somehow, but also more grounded. The rigidity in his chest had softened into something more flexible, but no less strong. Walking back through the bamboo forest, he practiced what he'd learned. When a strong gust came, he let his body sway slightly instead of bracing against it. When his mind started to grip tight around a thought, he practiced letting it bend and return instead of holding it rigid. By the time he reached the monastery gates, the lesson had settled into his bones. Flexibility wasn't weakness. It was strength refined. The bamboo had shown him how to be both solid and adaptable, both rooted and free. Master Sato was in the garden when Ren returned. The teacher looked up from the plant he was tending and studied his student's face. "You understand now," Master Sato said. It wasn't a question. "I understand that I've been practicing wrong," Ren replied. "Trying to be unmovable when I should have been learning to move and return." Master Sato smiled. "The bamboo is wiser than most teachers. Remember what it showed you when life's winds begin to blow. Don't fight them. Bend with them. Trust your roots to bring you back to center." From that day forward, Ren's practice changed. He stopped trying to force himself into rigid perfection and started trusting the flexibility of his own nature. When difficulties arose, he would remember the bamboo forest. Bend, but don't break. Move, but stay rooted. Adapt, but don't lose yourself. The teaching of the bamboo forest offers profound wisdom about how to move through life without being broken by it. Ren's discovery wasn't about becoming weak or passive. It was about understanding that true strength includes the ability to adapt. Think about the difference between the oak and the bamboo. Both are strong, but in different ways. The oak stands massive and solid, impressive in its seeming permanence. But that very rigidity makes it vulnerable. When a force comes that exceeds its ability to resist, something breaks. The bamboo approaches strength differently. It doesn't try to resist every force. Instead, it has the wisdom to move with forces it can't control, bending deeply when necessary, but always returning to center. This isn't weakness. It's intelligence. We often confuse rigidity with strength in our own lives. We think being strong means refusing to bend, standing firm against every challenge, never showing flexibility or change. But this approach exhausts us. We spend enormous energy resisting what we can't control, fighting battles that don't need to be fought. The bamboo shows a different way. It saves its energy for what matters. It doesn't waste strength fighting the wind, because fighting the wind is pointless. The wind will blow whether the bamboo likes it or not. So the bamboo bends, conserving its energy, and returns to vertical when the wind passes. The key to this flexibility is rootedness. The farmer's observation about the bamboo's roots reveals something essential. The stalks can bend so dramatically because they're anchored so deeply. Their flexibility above ground is possible because of their stability below ground. This applies directly to human life. When you're rooted in your core values, your deep sense of who you are, your essential nature, you can afford to be flexible about everything else. You can adapt to changing circumstances without losing yourself because you know what doesn't change. But when you're not rooted, when you don't have that deep stability, flexibility becomes frightening. You grip tight around everything because you're afraid that if you bend even a little, you'll lose yourself completely. Paradoxically, this rigidity is what makes you most vulnerable. Ren had been trying to be rigid because he thought that's what spiritual practice required. Stand firm. Don't waver. Maintain perfect discipline. But this approach was making him brittle, tense, ready to snap under pressure. The bamboo taught him that spiritual maturity might actually look like the opposite. Deeply rooted, but flexibly responsive. The farmer's point about bamboo not just surviving, but thriving offers another layer to this teaching. When you stop wasting energy fighting against reality, that energy becomes available for growth and adaptation. The bamboo doesn't exhaust itself resisting wind. It uses its energy to spread its roots, grow new shoots, extend its reach. How much of your energy goes into resistance? Resisting what is, resisting change, resisting the natural flow of life. That energy could be used for growth, for adaptation, for actually thriving in whatever conditions you find yourself. This doesn't mean becoming passive or accepting harmful situations without response. The bamboo is actively engaged with its environment, just not in a way that wastes energy on futile resistance. It knows what it can change, its own growth and adaptation, and what it can't, the wind itself. Zen Buddhism teaches this kind of wisdom. Not passive acceptance of everything, but intelligent discernment about where to put your energy. Responding appropriately to conditions rather than rigidly imposing your will on reality. When Ren practiced letting his body sway with the wind and his mind bend around thoughts instead of gripping them tight, he was learning a fundamental meditation principle. You don't have to fight every thought or resist every sensation. You can let them move through you, bending around them like bamboo bends around wind. The thoughts still come. Sensations still arise. Challenges still appear. But you're not breaking yourself against them. You're moving with them in a way that preserves your essential nature while allowing appropriate responsiveness. Your breath can show you this. Each inhale is a slight movement, each exhale a return. Not rigid, not forced, just the natural flexibility of being alive. Your body already knows how to be like bamboo. It's been breathing this way your whole life, bending and returning with each cycle. The rootedness that allows this flexibility isn't something you have to create. It's already here in the simple fact of your awareness. The part of you that notices thoughts is like the bamboo's roots, steady and unchanging even while everything else moves. When you recognize this, you can afford to be flexible about everything else. Thoughts can come and go. Moods can rise and fall. Circumstances can change. None of it threatens what you essentially are, because what you essentially are is the awareness that witnesses it all without being moved by any of it. This is the bamboo's teaching. Be rooted in what doesn't change so you can dance with what does. Be strong enough to be flexible. Be stable enough to adapt. And in that paradox, find a way of being that can move with life's inevitable changes without losing yourself. The temple complex was old, built centuries ago on the slope of a hill overlooking a wide valley. Jun had arrived there 6 months earlier, hungry for spiritual understanding. He'd studied the sacred texts, learned the meditation postures, memorized the chants and ceremonies. But instead of feeling closer to truth, he felt more confused than ever. Everything at the temple was so complicated. Rules about how to bow, when to bow, how deep to bow. Rituals with dozens of steps that had to be performed in exact sequence. Teachings layered on top of teachings until Jun's mind spun trying to keep track of it all. His teacher, Master Kenji, was a scholar who could recite entire sutras from memory and explain the most intricate points of Buddhist philosophy. Jun respected him deeply, but often felt overwhelmed by the complexity of his lectures. One morning, after a particularly dense teaching session, Jun sat in the meditation hall, feeling his headache from trying to understand it all. Master Kenji noticed his student's tension. "Jun," he said quietly, "perhaps you need some space to breathe. There's a lake, about an hour's walk from here. Go spend the day there. Just sit and watch. Don't try to figure anything out." Jun bowed gratefully and left immediately. The path to the lake wound through rice fields where farmers were already at work, then through a bamboo grove that rustled in the morning breeze. The air smelled of earth and growing things. When Jun emerged from the bamboo, the lake spread before him like a mirror. The water was so still it reflected the sky perfectly, making it hard to tell where earth ended and heaven began. And floating on that perfect mirror were lotus flowers. Hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Each one a masterpiece of simple beauty. Pink petals opening to the sun, white ones glowing like small moons, a few deep purple ones scattered among the others like jewels. Yoon walked to the lake's edge and knelt in the grass. It was soft beneath his knees, slightly damp with morning dew. He could smell the flowers now, a scent so subtle he had to breathe slowly to catch it. Clean. Fresh, alive. He watched one lotus in particular, close to shore. Perfect in its simplicity. Each petal arranged just so, not too many, not too few. The flower sat on the water's surface like it had no weight at all, completely at ease with itself. Jun felt something release in his chest. After months of wrestling with complicated teachings and elaborate rituals, here was something that needed no explanation. The lotus was beautiful simply because it was lotus. Nothing added, nothing taken away. Just itself, completely. He breathed deeper, letting the sight settle into him. The lake held the flowers without effort. The flowers floated without struggle. Everything was exactly as it needed to be, without anyone trying to make it so. Time passed without Jun noticing. The sun climbed higher. The flowers tracked its movements subtly, always turning toward the light. He watched this happen with a kind of wonder he hadn't felt since childhood. How did they know to do that? Not through thinking or trying, just through being what they were. A sound behind him made Jun turn. An old man was approaching along the shore, a fishing pole over his shoulder and a bucket in his hand. He had the look of someone who'd spent his whole life near water, skin weathered by sun and wind, eyes that crinkled at the corners. "Beautiful, aren't they?" the old man said, gesturing to the lotus flowers. "Yes," Jun replied. "I've never seen anything like this." The man set down his fishing gear and lowered himself to sit on a rock near where Jun knelt. "I've been fishing this lake for 50 years. The lotus always teaches me something new." "What does it teach?" Jun asked. The fisherman was quiet for a moment, looking out at the water. It teaches about where we come from and where we're going. See how the roots of the lotus grow down in the mud at the bottom of the lake? That's where they're anchored. In the dark, in the murky water where you can't see clearly. He pointed to one of the flowers. But the flower doesn't stay in the mud. It pushes up through the water, through all that darkness and confusion, and opens to the light. Clean and perfect. The mud didn't stain it. The murky water didn't damage it. It used all of that as nourishment to become what it is. Jun felt these words touch something deep in him. So even in darkness and confusion, there's a way to reach toward light? That's what the lotus shows us, the fisherman agreed. You don't have to wait until everything is perfect and clear to bloom. You bloom right in the middle of the mess. The mess is actually what feeds your growth. They sat together in silence, watching the flowers float and sway gently. A breeze moved across the water, creating ripples that made the lotuses dance. "Can I tell you something?" Yun said after a while. "I came here to get away from the temple because everything there feels too complicated. Too many rules and rituals and teachings. My mind can't hold it all, and I feel like I'm failing." The fisherman smiled with understanding. "And then you came here and found the lotus. About as simple as something can be. Just a flower, floating on water, opening to Sunday." "Yes," Jun said. "It makes me wonder if I've been making everything too difficult." "The lotus doesn't read sutras," the fisherman observed. "Doesn't perform rituals or try to understand complex philosophy. It just does what lotus does. Roots in mud, flower in light. That's enough." He stood and picked up his fishing pole. "Maybe that's true for you too. Maybe beneath all the complicated teachings you're studying, the truth is as simple as a lotus on a lake. Rooted in reality, reaching for understanding, blooming right where you are." After the fisherman moved down the shore to find his fishing spot, Jun stayed by the lake until the sun began to descend. He watched how the light changed on the water, how the flowers closed slightly as evening approached, how everything moved in natural rhythms that needed no instruction or explanation. When he finally stood to return to the temple, his legs were stiff from sitting so long, but his mind felt clearer than it had in months. The walk back seemed shorter somehow, or maybe he was just paying more attention to each step. At the temple, evening chanting had already begun. Jun could hear the voices as he approached, reciting words in the ancient language. But this time, instead of feeling overwhelmed by it, he heard something different. Beneath the complexity of the words, there was a simple rhythm. A basic truth being expressed in elaborate form. Master Kenji found him after the chanting ended. "How was the lake?" "It showed me what I needed to see," Jun said. "The lotus flowers are so simple, perfect in their simplicity. And I realized I've been making everything too complicated." Master Kenji smiled. "And now? Now I think I can come back to the teachings with fresh eyes. Not trying to grasp and hold every detail, but looking for the simple truth beneath all the words. Like looking for the lotus flower beneath all the ceremony." "Good," his teacher said. "The rituals and texts have their place. Their fingers pointing at the moon. But sometimes we spend so much time studying the fingers that we forget to look at the moon." The lake reminded you to look up. From that day forward, Jun approached his studies differently. The complicated ceremonies became less burdensome when he understood they were just elaborate ways of expressing simple truths. The dense philosophical texts became clearer when he looked for the basic insights they were trying to convey. Like the lotus anchored in mud, but blooming in light, he learned to be rooted in the reality of his experience while reaching for understanding. The confusion and difficulty weren't obstacles to clarity. They were the fertile ground from which clarity could grow. The Lotus Lake offered Jun a teaching that cuts through centuries of accumulated complexity and returns us to something essential. Truth doesn't have to be complicated to be profound. In fact, the deepest truths are often the simplest ones, just hidden beneath layers of elaboration. Jun's experience at the temple reflects something many of us encounter in various forms. We approach life, spirituality, growth, with genuine hunger for understanding. But then we get caught in complexity. Rules pile on top of rules. Techniques multiply. Explanations become more elaborate. And somehow, in all that complexity, we lose touch with the simple truth we were originally seeking. The lotus doesn't need instruction in how to be lotus. It doesn't study techniques for floating or read manuals about opening to sunlight. It simply is what it is, and its very simplicity makes it perfect. This doesn't mean that study and practice have no value. Jun didn't abandon the temple or reject his teacher's guidance, but the lake helped him see through the complexity to the essence beneath it. The rituals and teachings were fingers pointing at something simple. He'd been so busy studying the fingers that he forgot to look where they were pointing. The image of the lotus rooted in mud, but blooming in light, speaks to another aspect of this simplicity. We often think we need perfect conditions before we can flourish. We wait for clarity before we act, for understanding before we commit, for ideal circumstances before we allow ourselves to bloom. But the lotus shows us something different. It doesn't wait for the water to become clear. It doesn't demand that the mud be cleaned up before it grows. It uses the very murkiness as nourishment. The darkness and confusion aren't obstacles to its flowering. They're the ground from which its beauty emerges. How often do we postpone our own flowering because conditions aren't perfect? How often do we think we need to resolve all our confusion before we can access clarity? The lotus suggests we have this backwards. We bloom right in the middle of the mess. The mess itself becomes the fertile ground for growth. The fisherman's wisdom, earned through 50 years of watching the lake, points to this paradox. You don't have to escape your circumstances to find peace. You don't have to achieve perfect understanding before you can rest. Like the lotus, you can be rooted in reality exactly as it is while still reaching toward light. This is what Zen Buddhism calls living in the world, but not being stained by it. The lotus touches the muddy bottom, but doesn't become muddy. It floats on murky water, but remains clean. Not because it's fighting against contamination, but because its nature is to be lotus. The mud and murk simply can't change what it fundamentally is. You have this same quality. Beneath all the complexity of your life, beneath all your confusion and difficulty, there's something simple and clear. Your basic awareness, your fundamental nature, remains unstained no matter what it encounters. It's like the lotus flower floating on muddy water, completely itself regardless of circumstances. Jun's realization that he'd been making everything too complicated touches many of us. We accumulate techniques and practices and beliefs and frameworks until we can barely move under the weight of it all. And then something simple breaks through, a flower on a lake, a bird singing, a moment of clear seeing, and we remember that truth was never as complicated as we made it. This doesn't mean abandoning discrimination or becoming simplistic in our thinking. It means distinguishing between essential simplicity and accumulated complexity. What's actually true tends to be simple at its core. The elaborations we add might be useful in certain contexts, but they're not the truth itself. When Master Kenji spoke about fingers pointing at the moon, he was expressing a classic Zen teaching. The words, rituals, practices, teachings, they're all fingers pointing. Useful for directing attention. But they're not the moon itself. They're not the truth they're pointing toward. The danger is spending so much time analyzing the fingers that you never look up to see what they're indicating. This is what happened to Jun at first. He was working so hard to understand the teachings that he lost sight of what the teachings were teaching. The lake reminded him to look up, to see directly, to touch the simple truth beneath all the words. And once he did that, he could return to the words and rituals with new understanding. They became transparent rather than opaque. Windows to look through instead of walls to struggle against. What if you could be like the lotus tonight? Rooted in whatever reality you find yourself in, the day's tensions, tomorrow's concerns, the thoughts still moving through your mind, but blooming anyway. Opening to rest not because conditions are perfect, but because opening to rest is your nature. The mud and murk don't have to be resolved first. They can be there, acknowledged and accepted, while you still allow yourself to flower into sleep. This is the lotus teaching. This is the simple truth beneath all the complicated sleep advice. You already know how to do this. You just need to stop interfering with what knows. The monastery garden was Takeshi's responsibility, and he took it seriously. Maybe too seriously. Every morning before dawn, he would be out there with his rake, creating perfect patterns in the white gravel. Concentric circles around the stones, parallel lines flowing like water. Each line precise, each curve exact. It was a meditation, his teacher had told him. The act of raking the garden was meant to calm the mind, to bring order to inner chaos. And Takeshi needed that. His thoughts were always racing, always trying to control everything, always anxious about getting things right. The garden helped, at first. For those early morning hours when he was alone with the rake and the gravel, he could lose himself in the rhythm. Pull, step, pull, step. Watch the lines emerge clean and clear behind the rake's teeth. Feel satisfaction at the perfect geometry taking shape. But then the day would start, and the garden would begin to fall apart. A morning breeze would stir, scattering leaves across his perfect lines. Birds would land, their feet disrupting the patterns. Monks walking to the meditation hall would step carelessly across his work, leaving footprints in the gravel. By midday, the garden that had been pristine at dawn would be chaos. And every day, Takeshi would feel his frustration build. Why couldn't people be more careful? Why couldn't the birds land somewhere else? Why did the wind have to blow leaves into his garden? He'd spend his afternoons erasing the damage, re-raking the lines, trying to restore the perfection he'd created that morning. It was exhausting. More than that, it was making him bitter. He found himself resenting the wind, the birds, the other monks. Everything felt like an attack on his work, on his efforts to maintain order. One evening, his teacher, Master Fumio, came to sit beside him as he worked frantically to repair the day's damage. The old master watched in silence for a long time as Takeshi raked and muttered under his breath. "Takeshi," Master Fumio finally said, his voice soft. "Why are you fighting the garden?" Takeshi stopped raking. "I'm not fighting it. I'm trying to take care of it, to keep it beautiful." "Is it beautiful now?" the master asked, gesturing to the disturbed gravel, the scattered leaves, the imperfect lines. "No," Takeshi said. "Not yet. But it will be once I fix it." Master Fumio nodded slowly. "And then?" "Then it will be perfect again. Until tomorrow, when the wind will blow, and the birds will land, and the leaves will fall." The master's voice held no judgment, just observation. "And you'll fix it again, and again, and again, forever chasing perfection that lasts only moments." Takeshi felt something tighten in his chest. Then what's the point? Why rake the garden at all if it's just going to get messed up? "Good question," Master Fumio said. "Sit with me for a moment." They sat together on a low bench at the garden's edge. The evening light was fading, turning everything golden. A breeze moved through, and Takeshi watched helplessly as it disrupted more of his lines. "What do you see when you look at the garden right now?" Master Fumio asked. "I see chaos," Takeshi said. "Disorder. Things out of place." "Look again," the master suggested. "Really look." Takeshi tried. He looked at the leaves scattered across the gravel. Some were still green, others touched with autumn red and gold. They lay at random angles, creating patterns he never could have designed. The disrupted rake lines formed swirls around them, like water flowing around stones. A sparrow landed near one of the carefully placed rocks, pecking at something in the gravel. Its feet left tiny marks, delicate as brushstrokes. The bird hopped away, and those small marks remained, evidence of its visit. "I see," Takeshi said slowly, "that there's a kind of beauty in the disorder too. But that can't be what we're aiming for. The whole point of a Zen garden is order, right? Structure. Control." Master Fumio smiled. "Is it? Or is the point something else entirely?" He stood and walked to the center of the garden, bending to pick up one of the fallen leaves. "This leaf didn't ask permission to fall here. The wind didn't check with you before blowing. The bird didn't consider your perfect lines before landing. All of this happened naturally, spontaneously, without concern for your plans." "That's the problem," Takeshi said. "Or that's the teaching," Master Fumio replied. "You rake the garden every morning, creating order. That's your part. Nature adds disorder throughout the day. That's its part. Together, you're creating something neither of you could make alone." Takeshi shook his head. "But I'm trying to create beauty through order. Nature is destroying it with chaos. Are you sure?" The master gestured to the garden. "Look at how the leaf landed next to that stone. Look at the swirl pattern the wind made in the gravel. Look at the bird's footprints, creating a trail across your straight lines. Is this destruction or collaboration?" Takeshi looked. Really looked, not through the filter of his frustration, but with fresh eyes. And he began to see what his teacher meant. The garden with its perfect lines was beautiful, yes, But the garden with leaves and wind marks and bird prints had a different beauty. Alive, dynamic, real. "I've been trying to maintain a photograph," Takeshi said quietly. "A frozen moment of perfection. But the garden wants to be alive, changing, responsive to what happens." "Now you're beginning to understand," Master Fumio said. "The garden is teaching you about life itself. We create structure, which is good and necessary. But life keeps adding spontaneity, change, the unexpected. We can exhaust ourselves fighting this, trying to keep everything exactly as we planned. Or we can learn to dance with it." "Dance with it?" "Yes. You rake the lines. The wind moves them. You work with what the wind created. The bird lands. You incorporate its marks into your next pattern. The leaf falls. You see where it wants to be and adjust around it. Not giving up your part, but not fighting nature's part either." They sat together as darkness came. Takeshi felt something beginning to shift in how he saw the garden, and by extension, how he saw everything. "Tomorrow morning," Master Fumio said as he stood to leave, "rake the garden as you always do. Create your order, your beauty. But when the disorder comes, and it will, try welcoming it instead of resenting it. See what wants to happen when order and chaos work together." That night, Takeshi couldn't sleep at first. His mind was too busy reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the garden, about practice, about life. But eventually, exhaustion won and he slept deeply. The next morning, he raked the garden as usual, created his lines, his patterns, his order. But this time, when he finished, he didn't walk away with the anxious feeling that it would soon be ruined. Instead, he felt curious about what the day would bring. By mid-morning, leaves had fallen. The wind had disturbed some lines. A cat had walked through, leaving prints. And instead of frustration, Takeshi felt something almost like excitement. He took up his rake and began working with what was there. He created new patterns that incorporated the leaves where they'd fallen. He turned the wind swirls into features rather than flaws. He followed the cat's trail with his rake, extending it into a flowing line that became part of the design. The garden that emerged was nothing like what he'd planned that morning. It was better, more alive, more real. A collaboration between his intention and life's spontaneity. Master Fumio found him there at noon, still working, but with a completely different energy than before. No frantic fixing, no bitter muttering. Just creative response to what was. "The garden is teaching you well," the master observed. "It's teaching me that I can't control life," Takeshi said. "But I can dance with it. I can bring my part and let life bring its part, and together we make something neither of us could make alone." From that day forward, Takeshi's relationship with the garden transformed. He still raked it every morning, still created order and beauty. But he'd stopped fighting the chaos that came. Instead, he'd learned to weave it into his work, to see disorder not as destruction, but as life's contribution to an ongoing conversation. And something unexpected happened. As he learned to dance with the garden's chaos, he found he could dance with life's chaos too. When plans fell apart, he didn't panic. When unexpected things happened, he didn't resist. He brought his structure, his intention, his care. And he let life bring its surprises, its changes, its wild spontaneity. Together, they created a way of being that was both grounded and free. Takeshi's garden holds a teaching that reaches far beyond raked gravel and fallen leaves. It speaks to one of the fundamental tensions in human life, our desire for order meeting reality's constant change. We spend enormous energy trying to maintain control over our lives. We make careful plans. We try to anticipate every variable. We work to keep everything in its proper place. And then life happens. The unexpected arrives. Circumstances change. People act in ways we didn't predict. Our perfect plans get scattered like leaves in wind. When this happens, we have two choices. We can fight it, trying desperately to restore our original plan, resenting every deviation from our expectations. Or we can do what Takeshi learned, work with what is instead of fighting for what we wanted. This doesn't mean abandoning all structure or giving up on intention. Takeshi didn't stop raking the garden. He still created order every morning, still brought care and attention to his work. But he stopped believing that his order was the only acceptable state. He learned to see disorder not as failure, but as a different kind of contribution. The image of order and chaos working together as collaborators rather than opponents offers a profound shift in perspective. In our usual thinking, these are enemies. Order is good, chaos is bad. We should maximize one and eliminate the other. But the garden showed Takeshi that life needs both. Pure order with no spontaneity becomes rigid, lifeless, brittle. Everything is controlled, predicted, safe. But there's no vitality, no surprise, no room for life to express itself. Pure chaos with no structure becomes overwhelming, scattered, unsustainable. Everything is possible, but nothing has form or direction. The sweet spot is the dance between them. Structure that's flexible enough to incorporate spontaneity. Spontaneity that's grounded enough to work with structure. This is where life actually happens, in the dynamic tension between our plans and reality's surprises. Master Fumio's question about whether Takeshi was seeing destruction or collaboration cuts to the heart of how we interpret our experience. The exact same events can be viewed as problems or possibilities depending on our perspective. The fallen leaves didn't change. Takeshi's relationship to them changed, and that changed everything. Think about your own life. How many things do you label as problems that might actually be possibilities if you looked at them differently? How many disruptions to your plans might be life offering something you couldn't have planned yourself? This isn't about positive thinking or pretending that difficult things are actually good. Some disruptions genuinely are destructive. Some chaos genuinely does need to be resisted. But many, maybe most of the disruptions we face are neutral. They become problems only because they don't match what we wanted to happen. Takeshi's transformation came when he stopped demanding that reality match his expectations and started working creatively with what reality was offering. This is a form of wisdom that Zen Buddhism has pointed to for centuries. Not passive acceptance of everything, but active engagement with what is rather than what we wish was. The exhaustion Takeshi felt before his shift came from constant resistance. Fighting the wind, resenting the birds, trying to impose his will on forces that couldn't be controlled. This resistance drained his energy and created suffering that had nothing to do with the actual events, only with his relationship to them. When he learned to dance instead of fight, his energy was freed for creative response. He could use the same effort he'd been spending on resistance to instead work with what was happening. The garden became not a battlefield, but a canvas where he collaborated with forces larger than himself. The river had always flowed. For as long as anyone in the village could remember, it had wound through the valley in constant motion, singing over stones, rushing through narrows, pooling in quiet bends. Always moving, always going somewhere. But one autumn morning, Sora walked down to her usual spot by the water and stopped in confusion. The river was still. Completely still. The surface was like glass, reflecting the sky so perfectly she couldn't tell where water ended and air began. Sora knelt at the bank, staring. In the 3 years she'd lived at the temple just up the hill, she'd never seen the river like this. Even in the deepest winter, when ice formed at the edges, there was always current beneath, always movement. But today, nothing. Just stillness so complete, it seemed impossible. She reached out to touch the water, half expecting it to be frozen. But it was liquid, cool against her fingers, just not moving. The ripples from her touch spread out in perfect circles, then faded back to mirror calm. Strange, isn't it? Sora turned to find Master Hotaka standing behind her. The old teacher moved so quietly, she never heard him approach. He smiled at her startled expression and lowered himself to sit on a nearby rock. "I've never seen it like this," Sora said. "Is something wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong," Master Hotaka replied. "This happens sometimes. Conditions align in a particular way, temperature and pressure and a dozen other factors, and the river decides to rest. But rivers don't rest. They flow. That's what rivers do." The master nodded. "Usually, yes. But even rivers need stillness sometimes. Look closer at the surface. What do you see?" Sora looked. The reflection was so clear it was disorienting. Every tree on the far bank, every cloud in the sky, every bird that flew past appeared twice, once in the air and once in the water. Perfect mirror images. "I see everything reflected," she said. "And if the river was moving?" "You couldn't see the reflections clearly. They'd be broken by the current." "Exactly," Master Hotaka said. "The stillness allows the river to show you something movement can't. Both states have their gifts." Sora sat with this, watching the still water. After a while, she noticed something else. The surface might be still, but if she looked very carefully, she could see subtle movement beneath. Tiny currents, barely visible. Small shifts in the water like breathing. "It's not really still, is it?" she asked. "Not completely. There's still movement underneath." "Very observant," the master said. "True stillness doesn't mean the absence of all movement. It means movement so subtle, so refined that it appears still on the surface while remaining alive beneath." He picked up a small stone and tossed it gently into the river. Ripples spread from where it landed, disturbing the mirror surface. But within moments, the water settled back to stillness, absorbing the disturbance without being changed by it. "This is what I've been trying to teach you in meditation," Master Hotaka said. "You think stillness means forcing your mind to stop, making your thoughts disappear, creating some kind of blank emptiness. But that's not stillness. That's suppression." Sora felt her cheeks warm. He was right. She'd been fighting her mind in meditation, trying to wrestle it into silence, frustrated when thoughts kept appearing despite her efforts. Real stillness is like this river, the master continued. On the surface, calm. Underneath, alive with subtle movement. Thoughts can arise and pass without disturbing the fundamental peace. The stillness isn't fragile. It can hold movement within itself. They sat together in silence. Sora watched the river and felt something shifting in her understanding. She'd been approaching meditation like she needed to kill her thoughts, wage war on her mind, force it into submission. No wonder she always felt exhausted after sitting. No wonder peace felt so elusive. "How do I find this kind of stillness?" she asked. "Stop chasing it," Master Hotaka said simply. Stillness isn't something you create through effort. It's what's already here when you stop creating turbulence. "I don't understand." The master gestured to the river. "Why is it still today?" "You said something about conditions aligning. Temperature and pressure." "Yes. The river isn't trying to be still. It's not using some special technique. Conditions are right, and stillness is the natural result. When you sit in meditation, you create conditions. Quiet space, stable posture, gentle attention. Then you let stillness arise naturally instead of trying to manufacture it. Sora thought about this. "But what about my thoughts? They feel like they're preventing stillness." "Are they?" Master Hotaka picked up another stone and tossed it in the river. More ripples spread across the surface. Did that stone prevent the river from being still? It disturbed it temporarily. And now? Sora looked. The surface was calm again, as if the stone had never landed. It's still again. Because the river's fundamental nature is to return to stillness when nothing is actively disturbing it. Your mind is the same way. Thoughts arise like stones landing in water. They create ripples. But if you don't fight them or grab onto them or throw more stones, the ripples fade naturally and stillness returns. So I just let thoughts come and go? More than that, you recognize that the thoughts aren't preventing stillness. They're just ripples on the surface. Underneath, there's a depth that's always still, always quiet, regardless of what's happening above. Sora closed her eyes and tried to feel this in herself. At first, all she noticed were thoughts, the usual stream of mental chatter. But as she sat with it, not fighting it, she began to sense something beneath the thoughts. A quality of awareness that was watching the thoughts, but wasn't made of thoughts. Still, quiet, present. "I feel it," she whispered, afraid to speak too loudly and lose it. "Good," Master Hotaka said. "That's your river. That's the stillness that's always here, whether your thoughts are calm or churning. You don't have to create it or maintain it. You just have to recognize it." They sat by the river until the sun was high overhead. Gradually, almost imperceptibly, the water began to move again. A breath of wind stirred the surface. A leaf floated past. The river remembered its nature as flowing water and started to flow. But even as it moved, Sora could still sense the stillness underneath. The current might be rushing, but something in the river's depths remained quiet. Movement and stillness weren't opposites. They were partners in the same dance. When they walked back up the hill to the temple, Sora felt different. Lighter somehow, She'd been carrying the burden of trying to force stillness, trying to be perfectly peaceful through sheer effort. Now she understood she didn't have to carry that burden. Stillness was already there, waiting to be recognized beneath whatever turbulence appeared on the surface. That evening during meditation, thoughts came as they always did. But instead of fighting them, Sora let them be like ripples on the river. They arose, spread across the surface of her awareness, and faded. And underneath, she could feel the stillness that wasn't disturbed by their coming and going. Days later, she returned to the river. It was flowing normally again, rushing over rocks, creating white foam in the rapids. But she looked at it differently now. She could see the movement, yes, but she could also sense the stillness that held the movement. Both were true. Both were the river. The still river opens a teaching about the nature of peace that many of us misunderstand. We think peace means the absence of all disturbance, the complete cessation of mental activity, a state where nothing moves or changes. But this isn't peace. It's death. Real peace is alive. It can hold movement within itself without being disturbed by it. Like the river that appears still on the surface while remaining vital beneath, genuine inner peace doesn't require your thoughts to stop. It exists as the ground that thoughts move through, unchanged by their passing. Sora's struggle reflects what many of us experience in meditation and in life. We fight our own minds, trying to force silence, frustrated when thoughts keep appearing. This fighting creates more turbulence than the thoughts themselves. It's like throwing stones in the water while demanding the surface be still. Master Hotaka's teaching points to a different approach. Create conditions for stillness, then trust the natural process. Don't manufacture peace through force. Recognize the peace that's already present beneath your mental activity. The image of the river settling back to calm after being disturbed reveals something important about the mind's natural tendency. When you stop actively creating turbulence, things settle on their own. You don't have to push thoughts away or make them disappear. You just have to stop feeding them energy, stop fighting them, stop throwing more stones. This is what Zen Buddhism calls non-interference. Not doing nothing, but not doing too much. Creating space and then allowing natural processes to unfold. The river doesn't try to be still. Stillness arises naturally when conditions support it. The deeper teaching is about recognizing the stillness beneath movement. Even when the river is flowing, even when your mind is busy, there's a depth that remains quiet. This depth is your fundamental awareness, the part of you that witnesses thoughts without being made of thoughts. Most of us identify completely with the surface movement of our minds. We think we are our thoughts, our moods, our mental activity. But this is like the river thinking it's only the ripples on the surface and forgetting the depth beneath. When Sora felt the stillness under her thoughts, she touched something essential. There's a part of you that's always quiet, always at peace, regardless of what's happening in your mental and emotional weather. This isn't something you create. It's what you are beneath all the activity. The river's return to flowing after its period of stillness shows that movement and stillness aren't enemies. They're both natural expressions of the same river. Your mind will have active times and quiet times, turbulent periods and peaceful ones. Neither state is better or more spiritual than the other. Both are just the natural rhythm of consciousness. What if you could approach your bedtime mind like the still river? Let thoughts arise and pass like ripples on the surface. Don't fight them or grab them. Just let them be while resting in the deeper stillness that holds them all. This stillness doesn't require your thoughts to stop. It's already here, beneath the thoughts, beneath the worries, beneath the mental replay of the day. It's the awareness that's watching it all, completely at peace with whatever appears in its field. The stone landing in the river and the ripples fading back to calm illustrate how thoughts work when we stop interfering with them. Each thought arises, creates its ripple, and fades naturally when we don't grab it and turn it into a story. The problem isn't the thoughts. The problem is our relationship to them. This awareness is like the river's depth, undisturbed by whatever moves across its surface. Thoughts will come and go. Worries might arise and fade. Memories might flow past. All of this is just weather on the surface of the deep stillness that you fundamentally are. Trust this stillness. Rest in it. Let it hold you the way the river holds its ripples, completely accepting of whatever movement appears while remaining essentially peaceful. This is the stillness that doesn't exclude life, but includes all of life within its spacious acceptance. In a remote mountain valley where eagles nested in the high cliffs, there stood a small temple that few travelers ever found. The path to reach it was steep and dangerous, known only to those who lived nearby and the monks who called it home. Ichiro was the youngest monk there, barely 18, with a mind that never seemed to stop churning. He worried about everything. Whether he was practicing correctly, what the other monks thought of him, if he would ever understand the teachings. Each worry fed the next, until his mind felt like a tangled knot he couldn't unravel. One morning, unable to sit still through meditation, Ichiro slipped out of the hall and climbed to the high ridge above the temple. He needed air, space, somewhere to let his thoughts spread out instead of crushing him from the inside. The ridge was narrow, a knife edge of rock with steep drops on both sides. But the view was worth the danger. The whole valley spread below, with the temple looking small as a child's toy. Mountains marched away to the horizon in waves of blue and purple. Ichiro sat on a flat boulder and tried to breathe. His thoughts kept spinning. Maybe he wasn't cut out for monastic life. Maybe he should return to his family's village. Maybe he was wasting everyone's time trying to be something he could never become. A shadow passed over him, large and swift. He looked up to see an eagle soaring overhead. The bird was enormous, wings spread wide, riding the thermal currents that rose from the valley. It circled higher and higher with barely a movement, just small adjustments to catch the wind just right. Ichiro watched, fascinated. The eagle seemed completely at ease up there. No effort, no struggle, just pure presence in the empty sky. It rose until it was just a speck against the clouds, then hung there, motionless except for the slight trembling of its wingtips. From that height, what could the eagle see? Everything, probably. The whole valley at once. The temple, the villages, the rivers, the forests. All of it together in one view, none of it close enough to dominate its vision. Something about watching the eagle ease the knot in Ichiro's chest. Up there, everything that seemed so urgent and overwhelming from the ground became small. Part of a larger pattern. The eagle wasn't worried about any of it. It just rode the currents, seeing everything, attached to nothing. Beautiful creature, isn't it? Ichiro turned to find Master Riku standing a few feet away. The old teacher must have followed him up the trail, though Ichiro had heard nothing. "I'm sorry, Master," Ichiro said. "I should be in meditation." "You are meditating," Master Riku replied, settling himself on a nearby rock. "Just not in the hall. Sometimes the best teaching comes from watching." They sat together in silence, watching the eagles circle and drift. Another bird joined it, the two of them playing in the high air, diving and rising in patterns that looked like pure joy. "I can't seem to settle," Ichiro finally admitted. "My mind won't stop. Every thought hooks into the next one. I feel like I'm drowning." Master Riku nodded, not looking away from the eagles. "And what would the eagle tell you if it could speak?" "I don't know. To fly, I suppose." "To rise," the master corrected gently. "To find altitude. The eagle doesn't fight the storms below. It rises above them. From up there, it can see the storm, the clear sky, the mountains, the valleys. All of it at once. Nothing is too close, too overwhelming." Ichiro watched the eagles spiral higher. "But I can't actually fly." "No," Master Riku agreed. "But you can find that same height in your awareness. Right now, you're down in the valley of your thoughts, where each one feels huge and urgent. Every worry blocks your view. Every fear feels like the whole sky." He gestured to the eagles above. "What if you could step back? Rise up in your own awareness and see all those thoughts from a distance? They'd still be there, but they wouldn't fill your whole vision. You could see them as part of a larger landscape." "How do I do that?" "The same way the eagle does. Stop fighting the air and learn to ride it. Your thoughts are like wind currents. You can't stop them, but you don't have to let them toss you around either. Find the place in yourself that watches thoughts the way the eagle watches the valley. Present to it all, caught by none of it." Ichiro tried to feel what the master meant. He closed his eyes and noticed his thoughts. Worry about being a bad student. Anxiety about the future. Doubt about his abilities. Usually, he was inside these thoughts, carried along by them. But what if he could step back? He imagined himself rising like the eagle, gaining altitude on his own mental landscape. The thoughts were still there, but from this height, they seemed smaller. Just movements in the mind, like weather patterns in the valley. He could see them without being caught in them. "That's it," Master Riku said softly. "That space you're feeling right now, that watching awareness, that's your inner eagle. It can soar above anything. Not because it escapes, but because it finds the right altitude to see clearly." They sat until the eagles drifted away toward the far peaks. When Ichiro finally stood to return to the temple, something had shifted. The worries were still there, but they felt different. More like clouds passing through a vast sky than walls closing in around him. Over the following weeks, whenever Ichiro felt overwhelmed, he would remember the eagles. He practiced finding that inner altitude, that place of awareness that could watch his thoughts and feelings without being swept away by them. Not escaping from life, but finding the right distance to engage with it clearly. Master Riku noticed the change. "The eagle taught you well," he observed one evening. "It taught me that I don't have to be caught in every storm," Ichiro replied. "I can rise to where I see the storm and the clear sky and everything together. From there, nothing feels so overwhelming, That's detachment, the master said. Not running away, but finding the freedom to engage with life from a place of clarity instead of confusion. The eagle is always present, always aware, but never trapped by what it observes. The eagle's teaching reveals something essential about freedom. Ichiro discovered that detachment isn't coldness or distance from life. It's the ability to remain present without being consumed. We spend most of our time too close to our own experience. Each thought feels enormous because we're standing right next to it. Each emotion fills our whole field of vision. We're down in the valley where individual trees block our view of the forest. The eagle offers a different perspective. From height, you can see patterns instead of just fragments. You can hold many things in your awareness at once instead of being dominated by one urgent concern. This doesn't mean you care less. It means you see more clearly. Master Riku's teaching about riding the wind instead of fighting it points to a fundamental shift. The currents of thought and feeling will move through you whether you like it or not. Fighting them exhausts you. Learning to ride them, to maintain your center while they move, that's wisdom. The inner altitude Ichiro discovered is always available. It's the awareness that watches your thoughts without being made of thoughts. When you find this perspective, everything that seemed overwhelming becomes manageable. Not because problems disappear, but because you see them in context, as part of a larger whole. Detachment in Zen Buddhism doesn't mean not caring. It means caring without being trapped. Engaging fully without losing yourself. Like the eagle completely present to the valley, without being caught in any particular part of it. This understanding brings a natural ease. When you know you can rise above any mental storm, the storms lose their power to frighten you. They're just weather passing through the vast sky of your awareness. In a monastery garden where flowers bloomed in careful arrangement, there was one section left deliberately wild. Roses grew there, untended and uncontrolled, sprawling across old stone walls and tangling with each other in ways that would have horrified the careful gardeners. Kenta found himself drawn to this wild corner despite its disorder, or maybe because of it. Everything else in the monastery was so precise, so controlled. The wild roses felt like a secret pocket of truth in all that perfection. He was kneeling there one afternoon, reaching carefully between the branches to touch a deep red bloom when a thorn caught his finger. Sharp and sudden, it drew a small bead of blood. Kenta pulled his hand back with a curse, then immediately felt ashamed. A monk shouldn't curse over such a small thing. He looked at his finger, at the tiny wound, and then back at the rose that had pricked him. The flower was beautiful. Deep crimson petals layered in spirals, scent so rich it almost made him dizzy. But those thorns, vicious and sharp, guards protecting something precious. Both together, a voice said behind him. Kenta turned to see Master Takara, the abbot, standing at the edge of the wild garden. The old teacher's robes were simple and worn, her face lined with years of practice. "Master," Kenta said, standing quickly. "I was just looking at the roses." "And they bit you," Master Takara observed with a gentle smile. She came to stand beside him, looking at the same rose. "That's what roses do. They offer beauty and they draw blood. Both together, always." She reached out her own hand, showing Kenta the small scars on her fingers. "I tend these roses sometimes." Each scar is from a moment of reaching for beauty and finding the thorn instead. Or finding both at once. Why leave them wild like this? Kenta asked. The gardeners could trim them, train them, make them safer. Safer, yes, Master Takara agreed. But would they still be roses? Part of what makes them beautiful is their wildness, their refusal to be completely tamed. The thorns are not separate from the flower. They're part of the same plant, the same life. She touched a petal with obvious affection. Life is like this rose, Kenta. It offers us moments of incredible beauty. Love, joy, wonder, peace. And it also offers us pain, loss, disappointment, grief, difficulty. We spend so much energy trying to have one without the other, trying to pluck the flower and leave the thorns behind. But it doesn't work that way. So we just accept being hurt. We accept that beauty and pain often come together, the master replied. We don't seek pain, but we don't let fear of thorns keep us from reaching for flowers either. The question isn't how to avoid all thorns. The question is whether we're willing to risk the prick for the sake of the bloom. Kenta looked at his finger, the blood already drying. Such a small wound, really. Barely worth noticing. And in exchange, he'd gotten to touch that perfect flower, breathe that intoxicating scent. I've been trying to practice perfectly, he admitted. Never making mistakes, never feeling anything difficult, always staying calm and controlled. But it's exhausting. And I'm not sure it's working. Master Takara smiled with understanding. You're trying to be a rose with no thorns. But such a thing doesn't exist. The thorns are part of how the rose protects itself, how it maintains boundaries, how it stays wild and alive. Without them, it would be something else. Maybe still beautiful, but not a rose. They walked together through the wild garden. Roses sprawled everywhere, some in full bloom, others just budding, a few already fading to brown at the edges. Petals littered the ground in patterns that looked almost intentional. My teacher used to say that enlightenment isn't found by avoiding the thorns, Master Takara said. It's found in learning to hold the whole rose. Beauty and danger, joy and sorrow, peace and difficulty. All of it together, not grasping one part and rejecting the other. She paused beside a white rose, its petals luminous in the afternoon light. When you taste tea during ceremony, what do you notice? The flavor, Kenta said. Sometimes sweet, sometimes bitter. And? Both together, really. The sweetness is better because of the slight bitterness. They balance each other. Exactly, the master said. The bitter enhances the sweet. They're not opposites fighting each other. They're partners in creating the full experience of tea. She turned to face him directly. Your practice will have sweet moments, days when meditation feels effortless, when understanding comes easily, when everything flows. And it will have bitter moments. Days when you struggle, when nothing makes sense, when you question everything. Both are necessary. Both teach you. Both are the rose. Over the following months, Kenta's relationship with practice changed. He stopped trying to edit out the difficult parts and started seeing them as essential to the whole. When meditation was hard, he didn't assume he was doing it wrong. When doubts arose, he didn't try to force them away. He learned to hold it all. The ease and the struggle. the clarity and the confusion, the moments of deep peace and the moments of restless agitation. Like the rose holding both flower and thorn, he practiced holding all of it without needing to choose. One day, Master Takara found him in the wild garden again, this time deliberately working with the roses despite the thorns. He was pruning carefully, getting scratched occasionally, but not stopping. "You learned the lesson," she observed. "I'm learning it," Kenta corrected. "Every day, the rose teaches me again. Reach for beauty, accept the cost. Don't let fear of thorns keep me from the flower. Don't let the thorns make me resent the flower." The master nodded with satisfaction. The practice isn't about eliminating the bitter to have only sweet. It's about developing the capacity to taste both fully, to let them enhance each other, to accept the whole rose exactly as it is. The rose and the thorn reveal something we often resist. Life doesn't come in separate packages of good and bad. They're woven together, inseparable, each giving meaning to the other. Kenta's initial approach reflects how many of us engage with spiritual practice. We want the good parts, the peace and clarity and joy, without any of the difficult parts. We think enlightenment means transcending struggle, moving beyond pain into some realm of constant bliss. But Master Takara's teaching cuts through this misunderstanding. The rose doesn't apologize for its thorns. They're not a mistake or a flaw in the design. They're essential to what a rose is. When we try to have beauty without danger, sweetness without bitterness, joy without sorrow, we're trying to hold half a rose. It doesn't work. Life insists on presenting itself whole. The tea ceremony metaphor illuminates this beautifully. The slight bitterness in tea doesn't ruin the sweetness. It makes the sweetness more interesting, more complex, more real. Without the bitter notes, the sweet would become cloying, one-dimensional. This applies to all experience. The difficult moments in your life aren't preventing you from finding peace. They're part of the texture that makes peace meaningful. Joy feels deeper because you know sorrow. Rest feels sweeter because you know fatigue. Clarity shines brighter against the background of confusion. Master Takara's invitation is to stop fighting for an edited version of life and start engaging with the whole. This doesn't mean seeking out pain or difficulty. It means not letting fear of thorns keep you from reaching for the flowers that nourish you. The rose holds both without conflict. The same plant produces the soft petal and the sharp thorn. It doesn't divide itself into good and bad parts. It's just rose, complete, whole, exactly as it is. When you can hold your own experience this way, meeting both pleasure and pain with the same fundamental acceptance, something shifts. Not that everything becomes easy, but you stop wasting energy fighting against half of reality. Kenta discovered that the difficult moments in practice weren't signs of failure. They were the thorns that come with the flower of growth. Without them, the beauty would be shallow, untested, more aesthetic than real. This teaching brings a deep ease. Not the ease of having everything go your way, but the ease of meeting whatever comes without needing it to be different. The rose doesn't wish its thorns away. It simply is what it is, beautiful and dangerous, soft and sharp, giving and protecting. On a hillside overlooking the sea, where the land rose steep and rocky before dropping away to cliffs, there stood an old shrine that few people visited anymore. The path to reach it had grown over with grass, the stone steps cracked and uneven with age. Naoki had been climbing these steps for 3 nights in a row, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. He was a merchant's son, expected to take over the family business, but lately nothing felt right. Like he was missing some essential piece of himself that he needed to find before he could move forward. Tonight was the full moon. He'd heard the old stories about how the full moon seen from this hill could show you what you'd been searching for. Probably just superstition, but he'd tried everything else. The climb took longer than he expected. By the time he reached the shrine at the top, he was breathing hard and his legs ached. But the view made him forget the effort immediately. The ocean spread below him, vast and dark, with moonlight painting a silver path across the water. Above, the moon hung huge and round, so bright it cast shadows. And everywhere he looked, that silver light transformed the ordinary world into something otherworldly. Naoki found a flat rock near the shrine and Saturday. The stone was still warm from the day's Sunday. He could hear waves breaking against the cliffs far below, a steady rhythm that matched his breathing. He looked up at the moon, perfectly round, completely itself, not trying to be anything other than what it was. Something about that wholeness struck him. The moon wasn't questioning itself, wasn't wondering if it should be brighter or positioned differently in the sky. It just was. Complete. Entire. Lacking nothing. When had he last felt that way? Complete in himself, not reaching for something outside to fill a gap inside. He sat with that question for a long time. The moon moved slowly across the sky, the angle of light changing subtly, but the moon itself remaining exactly what it was. Footsteps on the path made him turn. An old woman was climbing the last few steps to the shrine, moving slowly but steadily. She carried a small bundle of incense and a cloth bag. "Good evening," she said when she noticed him. Her voice was surprisingly strong for her age. "You're here for the moon too?" "I suppose I am," Naoki replied. She smiled and moved to the shrine, lighting her incense with practiced movements. The sweet smoke drifted on the night breeze. When she finished her prayers, she came to sit on a rock near Naoki. "I come every full moon," she said. "Have for 40 years since my husband died. There's something about the full moon that reminds me of what's real." "What do you mean?" She looked up at the moon, her weathered face peaceful. "The moon is always whole. Even when we can't see all of it, when it appears as a crescent or half, it's still entirely itself. The wholeness never goes away. Only our view of it changes." Naoki felt something stir in his chest. "So we're like that too?" "That's what I've learned," the old woman said. "We feel incomplete, like something's missing, like we need to find or achieve or become something before we're whole. But it's just the angle we're looking from. We're already complete. We just can't always see it." She opened her cloth bag and pulled out 2 rice balls wrapped in leaves. "Are you hungry?" "I always bring extra." They ate together in comfortable silence, watching the moon continue its journey across the sky. The rice was simple but good, flavored with salt and sesame. "I've been feeling lost," Naoki admitted. "Like there's something I'm supposed to find or do or be, but I don't know what it is. Everything feels wrong." The old woman nodded. "I felt that way after my husband died. Like half of me was gone, and I needed to find it somewhere. I searched for years. tried to fill the emptiness with work, with helping others, with pilgrimages to sacred places. Nothing worked. What changed? The moon taught me, she said simply. One night I was sitting right here, feeling sorry for myself, and I looked up at the full moon, and I realized it wasn't giving me anything. It wasn't filling my emptiness. It was just reflecting back what was already there. She gestured to the ocean below, where the moon's reflection trembled on the water. See that? The moon is reflecting on the water, but the reflection isn't the moon. The moon is still up there, complete and whole, regardless of what appears on the water's surface. I don't understand. You're looking for completeness in reflections, she explained. In achievements, relationships, possessions, experiences. Those are like the moon's reflection on water. Beautiful, but they're not the actual moon. The completeness you're seeking is already in you. It's what you are, not what you need to find. Naoki looked up at the moon again. Whole. Complete. Not seeking anything, not lacking anything. Just being fully what it was. How do I know that's true? He asked. How do I feel that completeness when everything tells me I'm not enough? The old woman was quiet for a moment. What's here right now, in this moment? You're breathing. Your heart is beating. You're aware of the moon, the ocean, me sitting here with you. Is anything missing from this moment itself? Naoki scanned his present experience. The warmth of the stone beneath him, the cool night air, the sound of waves, the light of the moon, his own quiet presence, witnessing all of it. Nothing was missing. The moment was complete exactly as it was, and he was part of that completeness, not separate from it. I see what you mean, he said quietly. That seeing is enough, the old woman replied. You don't have to hold on to it or make it permanent. Just knowing it's possible changes everything. The completeness is always here, even when you lose sight of it. Like the full moon behind clouds. They sat together until the moon began to set toward the ocean horizon. When the old woman stood to leave, she touched his shoulder gently. Come back next month if you want. The moon will be full again, and I'll be here. But you don't need to come back to be complete. You already are. After she left, Naoki stayed until the moon touched the ocean, spreading liquid silver across the waves. He felt different, lighter, not because he'd found what he was looking for, but because he'd realized there was nothing to find. It had been here all along. When he descended the hill in the pre-dawn darkness, the world looked the same, but he saw it differently. The incompleteness he'd been carrying was just a story, a way of seeing. The truth was simpler. He was already whole. He'd always been whole. He just kept forgetting to notice. The full moon teaches something that runs counter to almost everything we're told about ourselves. We grow up learning that we're incomplete, that we need to acquire things, achieve things, become things before we're enough. This creates a constant sense of lack. Something's always missing. Some piece we need to find before we can finally rest, finally be okay, finally feel whole. But what if that's backwards? What if the incompleteness is learned, not fundamental? What if you're already whole, already complete, and the only problem is that you've been taught not to see it? The old woman's distinction between the moon and its reflection cuts to the heart of this. We spend our lives chasing reflections. If I get this job, this relationship, this achievement, then I'll be complete. But these are just reflections, temporary appearances on the surface of things. They can't give you wholeness, because wholeness isn't something you can acquire from outside. This isn't about giving up on goals or pretending you don't have genuine needs. It's about recognizing that beneath all the striving and seeking, there's already a fundamental okayness. You're already here, already alive, already aware. That's complete in itself. Naoki's realization came when he checked his present moment experience directly. Not his thoughts about the past or future, but the actual felt sense of being here now. And he found nothing missing. The moment itself was whole. This is what Zen Buddhism points to when it talks about original nature or Buddha nature. Before you learned to feel incomplete, before you started believing something was wrong with you, there was just this: awareness, presence, being, already complete. The moon behind clouds remains full even when we can't see it. Your fundamental completeness remains true even when you lose touch with it. The clouds of thought, the stories about what you lack, they don't change what's true underneath. They just temporarily hide it from view. This teaching brings a profound relief. You can stop waiting to become worthy. You can stop postponing okayness until you fix everything. The wholeness you seek isn't at the end of a long journey. It's here, now, available in the simple recognition of what's already true. In a valley where mist gathered thick each morning, there was a temple known for keeping a sacred flame. The flame had burned continuously for 300 years, tended by generations of monks who took turns feeding it fuel and protecting it from wind and rain. Shin was the youngest monk tasked with flame-keeping duty. It wasn't glamorous work. It meant waking in the middle of the night to add wood. It meant sitting in the flame room during cold winters and hot summers, watching to make sure nothing went wrong. It meant treating this one small fire as if it were the most important thing in the world. Some nights, watching the flame flicker and dance, Shin wondered what the point was. Why keep this one fire burning? What difference did it make? Master Yoshi found him on such a night, sitting by the flame looking discouraged. "Trouble?" the old teacher asked. "I don't understand why we do this," Shin admitted. "Keeping one fire lit for 300 years. So much effort for something that seems so small." Master Yoshi settled himself near the flame, holding his hands toward its warmth. "Tell me, what keeps this flame burning?" "I do. We do. The monks who tend it." "And what did the flame need from you tonight?" "Wood, air, attention. And if you stopped giving it these things?" "It would die," Shin said. "So the flame depends entirely on your care," Master Yoshi observed. "But what does your care depend on?" Shin thought about this. "My commitment, my attention, my willingness to keep showing up. And where does that commitment come from? I don't know anymore. That's the problem." Master Yoshi smiled. "Let me ask differently. What happens in you when you feed the flame? What do you feel?" Shin paid attention to his own experience. When he added wood to the fire, when he watched it catch and flare brighter, what did he feel? A quiet satisfaction, a sense of purpose, connection to something larger than himself. I feel like I'm part of something, he said slowly. Something that started before me and will continue after me. The flame connects me to all the monks who've tended it before. Yes, Master Yoshi said. And what else? Shin watched the flame closely. It never stayed the same. Always moving, changing, responding to each new piece of wood. Alive in a way that felt almost conscious. The flame teaches me, he realized, about attention, about constancy, about how small, steady efforts add up to something that lasts. Now you're beginning to understand, the master said. The flame isn't just something you tend, it's something that tends you. You feed it wood. It feeds you wisdom. You give it attention. It gives you purpose. You protect it from going out. It protects you from feeling empty. Shin felt something click into place. So, we're tending each other. All living things do this, Master Yoshi replied. Trees give us shade and oxygen. We protect trees by planting and caring for them. Rivers provide water. We keep rivers clean. Everything tends everything else. Nothing exists alone. He gestured to the flame. This fire is your teacher in how to tend your own inner flame. The one that makes you feel alive, connected, purposeful. That flame also needs feeding. Also needs protection from wind and rain. Also needs someone to wake up in the middle of the night and add fuel when it's burning low. How do I feed that flame? Shin asked. The same way you feed this one. With attention. With small, consistent acts. With showing up even when you don't feel like it. With remembering why it matters. Over the months that followed, Shin's relationship with flamekeeping changed. He stopped seeing it as a duty and started experiencing it as a practice. The outer flame became a mirror for his inner flame. When he felt his energy low, his purpose dimming, he would come sit by the fire and remember small fuel, steady tending, constant attention. That's all it took to keep something burning across centuries. He began to notice his inner flame more carefully. What fed it? Time in meditation. Conversations with fellow monks. Moments of quiet in the early morning. Acts of service. Learning something new. These were his fuel. What threatened it? Exhaustion without rest. Comparison with others. Forgetting his purpose. Letting criticism from his own mind blow cold winds on his warmth. These he learned to protect against, the way he protected the outer flame from drafts. One evening, Master Yoshi found him tending the flame with obvious care and attention. You understand now, the master observed. I understand that keeping the flame alive keeps me alive, Shin replied. Not physically, but in the way that matters. It reminds me to tend my own light. To feed what makes me feel connected and purposeful. And when your flame burns low, I remember this one. How it's been kept burning for 300 years by people who showed up, added fuel, paid attention. I can do the same for myself. The master nodded with satisfaction. The flame will teach you for the rest of your life. Every time you feed it, you'll remember to feed yourself. Every time you protect it, you'll remember what you need protection from. Every time you watch it burn steady and bright, you'll remember what's possible when something is truly tended. Years later, when Shin became the master of flame-keeping and taught younger monks, he would tell them, "This isn't about keeping one small fire alive. It's about learning what it takes to keep anything alive. Your joy, your purpose, your sense of connection. These are flames too. They need the same care, the same attention, the same steady tending." The sacred flame reveals something essential about what it means to be alive and aware. We talk about keeping our spirits up, maintaining our energy, staying connected to what matters. But we rarely think about this as an active practice, something that requires consistent tending. The relationship between Shin and the flame shows how outer practices can illuminate inner realities. The fire isn't just a symbol. It's an actual teacher demonstrating through its behavior what's true about all living things. Master Yoshi's insight that the flame tends Shin as much as Shin tends the flame points to a fundamental truth. Nothing exists in isolation. Everything lives in relationship, giving and receiving, tending and being tended. When you care for something beyond yourself, you discover that care flowing back to you in unexpected ways. The question about what feeds your inner flame is worth sitting with. Not in an abstract way, but practically. What actually makes you feel alive? What activities, relationships, practices leave you feeling more connected to yourself and the world? These are your fuel. They deserve the same careful attention Shin gave to choosing wood for the sacred fire. And what threatens your flame? What leaves you feeling drained, disconnected, diminished? Not everything that threatens your flame can be avoided, but you can protect yourself the way Shin protected the fire from wind and rain. Sometimes protection means saying no. Sometimes it means creating boundaries. Sometimes it means simply recognizing what depletes you so you can add extra fuel afterward. The image of the 300-year flame offers hope. What seems impossible to maintain forever becomes possible through small, consistent tending. You don't have to keep your inner light burning bright every single moment. You just have to not let it go out completely. You just have to show up with more fuel when it's burning low. This is what spiritual practice actually looks like. Not grand gestures or dramatic transformations, but small acts of tending repeated over time. A few minutes of quiet each morning. A moment of gratitude before sleeping. Choosing one thing that feeds your flame instead of depletes it. These small fuels add up. Shin's realization that keeping the flame alive keeps him alive touches the deepest purpose of practice. We tend our inner light not as one more obligation, not to achieve some distant goal, but because the tending itself is how we stay truly alive. How we remain connected to what matters. How we keep the warmth of meaning and purpose from going cold. The flame teaches constancy without rigidity. It's always burning, but it's never the same fire twice. Each moment it's consuming new fuel, creating new light, responding to new conditions. This is how you can be both steady and alive, committed and responsive, constant and always new. When your inner flame burns low, remember Shin tending the sacred fire. Remember that 300 years of light came from people showing up, adding fuel, paying attention. You can do this too. Not perfectly, not without the flame occasionally dimming, but steadily enough that the light never goes out completely. In a temple garden where ancient maple trees grew, autumn had come early that year. The leaves were turning brilliant shades of red and gold, and each day the ground became more thickly carpeted with them. Akane had been assigned to keep the garden paths clear. It was her responsibility, and she took it seriously. Every morning she would sweep the paths clean, gathering the fallen leaves into neat piles. But by afternoon, more leaves would fall. By evening, the paths looked as if she'd never touched them. It was maddening. She would sweep the same path 3, 4, 5 times a day. The moment she finished, more leaves would drift down, undoing her work. She began to resent the trees, resent the wind, resent autumn itself for making her task impossible. One afternoon, after sweeping the main path for the 4th time that day, Akane stood leaning on her broom, breathing hard with frustration. As she watched, 3 more leaves detached from the branches above and spiraled down, landing precisely where she'd just swept. She wanted to scream. "The trees are not your enemy," a voice said. Master Isamu stood nearby, so still she hadn't noticed him. The old teacher had a way of appearing when you needed him most, or maybe when you least wanted to be observed. "They won't stop dropping leaves," Akane said, trying to keep the anger out of her voice. "I sweep and sweep, and it makes no difference." "Come sit with me," Master Isamu said, gesturing to a bench beneath one of the maples. "Just for a moment. Leave the broom." Reluctantly, Akane set down her broom and joined him. The bench was covered with leaves. She started to brush them off, but the master stopped her with a gentle hand. "Let them be. Sit anyway." They sat on the leaf-covered bench, looking up through the branches. The afternoon light filtered through, turning the remaining leaves into stained glass. "What do you see?" Master Isamu asked. "Leaves. Thousands of them, all waiting to fall and make more work for me." "Look at how they fall," the master suggested. "Really watch." Akane watched. A leaf released from a high branch, spinning as it fell. It didn't drop straight down, but danced on the air, turning this way and that, taking its time on the journey to earth. Another followed, then another. Each one falling in its own way, at its own pace. "The tree isn't pushing them away," Master Isamu observed. "The leaves aren't clinging to stay. When the time comes, the connection simply releases. Natural as breathing." Akane watched a leaf let go. One moment attached, the next falling. No struggle, no resistance. Just release. "I'm trying to hold back autumn," she said quietly. "You're trying to hold back change," the master replied. "Trying to make things stay as you want them. But the leaves teach something else. They show how to let go when the time comes. Not before, not after. Just when the season turns. But my job is to keep the paths clear." "Yes. And the leaves' job is to fall." Both are true. Both are necessary. The question is whether you can do your job without resenting the leaves for doing theirs. They sat in silence, watching more leaves descend. Akane noticed something she'd missed before. The trees themselves seemed peaceful, unconcerned with losing their leaves. They didn't grip tighter or try to keep what was ready to go. They just let each leaf release when its time came. "I've been holding on to everything too tight," Akane said. "Not just the clean paths. Everything. Trying to keep things exactly as they are, getting upset when anything changes. And how does that feel? Master Isamu asked. Exhausting. Yes. Fighting change is always exhausting. It's like trying to tell the tree to keep its leaves through winter. The tree knows better. When the season turns, holding on becomes suffering. Letting go becomes freedom. Over the next few days, Akane swept the paths as before, but her relationship to the work changed. She stopped seeing each new fallen leaf as a personal affront. They were just leaves, doing what leaves do. She was just a sweeper, doing what sweepers do. Both following their nature, neither in conflict. She began to enjoy the falling, the way leaves spiraled down like dancers, the soft sound they made landing, the rich smell of them piled in corners. She swept because that was her task, not because she believed she could stop autumn. One morning, Master Isamu found her sitting on the bench, watching leaves fall, her broom resting beside her. Slacking? He asked with a smile. Learning, she replied. The trees are teaching me how to let go. I thought I needed to control everything, keep everything in place. But watching them release these leaves so easily, I'm learning it's okay to let things change. To let things end when their time comes. And you're sweeping? I still sweep. But I'm not fighting the leaves anymore. I'm just doing my part while they do theirs. It's actually peaceful now. The master nodded. This is wisdom. Not controlling the seasons, but moving with them. Not resisting change, but recognizing when it's time to release what you've been holding. As autumn deepened, Akane found herself applying this lesson beyond the garden. When difficult emotions arose, she didn't cling to them or fight them away. She let them come and go like falling leaves. When plans didn't work out, she released them more easily, trusting that they'd fallen for a reason. When relationships changed, she practiced the tree's wisdom. Connection is beautiful and release is natural. The garden paths still needed sweeping. The leaves still fell. But Akane had stopped fighting autumn and learned to dance with it instead. The falling leaves teach what might be the hardest lesson in being human, the art of letting go. We spend so much energy trying to hold things in place. Relationships that have run their course. Jobs that no longer fit. Versions of ourselves we've outgrown. We grip tight, afraid that letting go means losing something essential. But watch a tree in autumn. It doesn't diminish itself by releasing its leaves. It doesn't become less than it was. The letting go is part of its nature, part of the cycle that allows new growth when spring returns. Akane's struggle was thinking she could prevent change through sheer effort. But fighting change doesn't stop it. It only exhausts you. The leaves fall whether you resent them or welcome them. The only question is how much you suffer in the process. Master Isamu's teaching points to something subtle. Letting go isn't giving up or being passive. It's recognizing when holding on has become suffering. The tree knows this instinctively. When the season turns, when the connection between branch and leaf has served its purpose, release becomes natural. We can develop this same wisdom. Not letting go of everything indiscriminately, but learning to sense when we're gripping something past its time. When the effort to maintain what was is preventing what wants to become. The peace Akane found came not from getting the trees to stop dropping leaves, but from accepting that falling is what leaves do. She could sweep without resenting the nature of things. She could do her work without needing reality to be different than it is. This acceptance doesn't mean you stop caring or cease your efforts. Akane still swept the paths, but she swept in harmony with autumn rather than in opposition to it. She did her part without demanding that the world stop doing its part. Think about what you might be holding too tightly. What are you trying to preserve past its natural season? What would it feel like to release your grip just slightly, to let things change and shift and fall away when their time comes? The trees show that letting go can be graceful, not a violent ripping away, but a gentle release when the connection has naturally dissolved. This is how endings can be when we stop fighting them. Natural, peaceful, making space for whatever comes next. In a valley monastery known for its demanding practices, there lived a young monk named Daiki who had been training for 5 years. He meditated for hours each day. He studied the ancient texts until his eyes ached. He performed every ritual with exacting precision. He barely slept, afraid that rest meant slacking in his spiritual pursuit. Other monks seemed peaceful, settled in their practice. But Daiki felt farther from enlightenment than when he'd started. The harder he tried, the more elusive peace became. It was like chasing a shadow. The faster he ran toward it, the faster it fled. He was exhausted. His body ached from long meditation sessions in rigid posture. His mind spun with concepts and techniques and frameworks for understanding. He had notebooks full of insights, plans for practice, goals for realization. But actual peace? That remained out of reach. One evening, unable to sit still for another moment, Daiki walked out to the edge of the monastery grounds where a small stream ran. He sat on a rock by the water, his whole body tense with frustration. Master Kaito found him there, hunched over, head in his hands. "Daiki," the old teacher said gently, "you look worse than when you arrived 5 years ago." "I'm trying so hard, Master," Daiki said, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. "I practice more than anyone. I study longer, meditate deeper, push myself harder. But I'm not getting anywhere. What am I doing wrong?" Master Kaito sat on a nearby rock. "Show me how you meditate." Daiki immediately straightened his spine, arranged his legs in perfect posture, controlled his breathing with careful counts, and forced his face into an expression of serene concentration. Every muscle in his body was tight with effort. "And how long do you sit like this?" the master asked. 4 hours each morning, 3 each evening." "How does it feel?" "Painful, exhausting. But I thought that's what practice requires. Discipline, effort, pushing through resistance." Master Kaito was quiet for a long moment, watching the stream flow past. "Do you see that water?" "Yes." "Is it trying to flow?" Daiki looked at the stream. The water moved effortlessly over rocks, around roots, following the path of least resistance. It wasn't straining or forcing. It just flowed, because that's what water does. "No," Daiki admitted. "It's just flowing." "And does it reach the ocean?" "Eventually, yes." "Through trying hard?" "Through following its nature." Master Kaito nodded. "For 5 years, you've been trying to force yourself into enlightenment, trying to create peace through effort. But peace isn't something you achieve through struggle. It's what remains when you stop struggling. But surely practice requires effort, Daiki protested. I can't just do nothing. There's a difference between true practice and trying too hard, the master said. True practice is like the stream. It follows its natural course with full presence but without strain. What you're doing is like building a dam and then wondering why you feel blocked. He gestured to Daiki's rigid posture. Even now, sitting here talking with me, you're trying so hard to be a good student that you can't simply be present. Every part of you is working to achieve some idea of what you should be. Can you feel how exhausting that is? Daiki felt it. The constant monitoring, adjusting, striving. He was never just here. He was always measuring himself against some imagined ideal, always pushing towards something just out of reach. What if you stopped trying for just a moment? Master Kaito suggested. Not stopped practicing. Stopped trying to make practice happen. Just let yourself be here, by this stream, exactly as you are. That feels like giving up. Does the stream give up when it stops forcing? Daiki didn't know how to let go of trying. It was so deeply ingrained. But he was exhausted enough to experiment. He let his shoulders drop, stopped controlling his breathing, released his rigid posture, let his face relax into its natural expression. Immediately, he felt like he was doing it wrong, like he'd failed. But he stayed with it anyway, letting himself be exactly as he was in that moment. Tired, frustrated, confused, not trying to be peaceful, just allowing what was actually here. And in that small release of trying, something shifted. The stream kept flowing. Birds called in the trees. His breath moved in and out by itself. Everything was already happening without his effort to make it happen. I've been working so hard to become peaceful that I never noticed peace was already here, Daiki said quietly. Not in me, but as me. As everything. I just kept covering it up with my trying. Yes, Master Kaito said. The trying is what prevents what you're trying to achieve. It's like digging a hole to find the ground. The ground is already here. The digging just makes it harder to see. Over the following weeks, Daiki's practice transformed. He still meditated, but without trying to force some special state. He still studied, but without grasping for knowledge. He still practiced rituals, but without the desperate hope that this time, finally, they would deliver enlightenment. The change was subtle but profound. Instead of exhausting himself reaching for peace, he learned to notice the peace that was already present beneath his reaching. Instead of trying to become someone worthy of awakening, he started recognizing the awareness that was already awake, already here, already whole. Master Kaito watched this transformation with quiet satisfaction. One morning, finding Daiki sitting by the stream with an expression of simple presence, the teacher smiled. Better? He asked. So much better, Daiki replied. I stopped trying to arrive somewhere I already am. The stream taught me that. It's always already at every point on its journey to the ocean. It doesn't wait until it reaches the sea to be truly flowing. And you? I'm already what I was trying to become. I just kept missing it because I was too busy trying. Daiki's exhausting search reveals a paradox at the heart of spiritual practice. the trying itself often becomes the obstacle. We work so hard to achieve peace that the very effort prevents peace from being recognized. This doesn't mean practice has no place or that effort is always wrong. It means we need to understand what we're actually doing. Are we creating conditions for recognition, or are we trying to manufacture an experience through force? The stream flows without trying to flow. Birds sing without effort to be musical. Your heart beats, your lungs breathe, your body digests food, all without your conscious effort. Life knows how to live itself. Awareness knows how to be aware. The trying gets in the way. Master Kaito's question about the stream points to this. Water doesn't reach the ocean through exhausting effort. It reaches the ocean by following its nature, taking the path that opens, moving with rather than against what is. The reaching is already the arriving, every moment of the journey. Daiki's 5 years of struggle came from believing he needed to become something other than what he was. He needed to achieve special states, gain special insights, transform into someone worthy of peace. But this is backwards. Peace isn't the reward for becoming perfect. Peace is what you are beneath the trying to be perfect. When he finally let go, when he stopped forcing and simply allowed himself to be exactly as he was in that moment, tired and frustrated and confused, something essential could be recognized. Not because he'd achieved anything, but because he'd stopped preventing the recognition through his trying. This is what Zen teachers mean when they say you already have what you're seeking. Not that you shouldn't practice, but that practice isn't about acquiring something absent. It's about removing the obstacles to seeing what's already present. The image of digging a hole to find the ground captures this perfectly. The ground is right here, always has been. The digging just keeps you too busy to notice. When you stop digging, when you simply stand still, the ground reveals itself as what you've been standing on all along. Think about your own striving. Where are you trying too hard? Where has effort become a barrier rather than a bridge? What might be revealed if you stopped trying to make something happen and simply allowed what's already here to be recognized? This doesn't mean abandoning all effort or becoming passive. It means distinguishing between the effort that opens and the effort that closes. Between practice that creates space for recognition and trying that fills that space with more doing. Daiki still meditated after his realization. But the meditation changed from trying to force peace to simply being present with what was already here. From performance to recognition. From achievement to allowing. The peace he found wasn't something new that his trying finally created. It was what had been here all along, patiently waiting beneath the noise of his desperate seeking. Like the ground beneath the hole he'd been frantically digging. When you recognize this for yourself, even for a moment, everything shifts. Not because you've finally gotten somewhere, but because you've realized you were always already here. The trying can dissolve because there's nowhere to get to. The striving can ease because there's nothing to become. You can simply be what you already are, which is already enough, already whole, already home. These ancient teachings from Zen Buddhism point to something simple beneath all their varied forms. The peace you seek isn't distant. The wholeness you long for isn't absent. The freedom you pursue isn't waiting at the end of some long journey. Everything these stories have touched, from mountains and caves to bamboo and lotus flowers, from gardens and rivers to eagles and flames, they all point to the same truth. What you seek is already here, already you, already complete. Not because you've earned it or achieved it, but because it's your fundamental nature, temporarily hidden beneath layers of seeking and striving and believing something's wrong. The mountain showed that peace doesn't depend on perfect conditions. The cave revealed the sacred space inside yourself. The bamboo taught flexibility rooted in strength. The lotus demonstrated beauty emerging from mud. The garden showed harmony between order and chaos. The still river revealed peace that holds movement within itself. The eagle offered perspective that sees without being caught. The rose held both beauty and thorn in the same embrace. The moon reflected your completeness exactly as you are. The flame illuminated what it means to tend what matters. The falling leaves taught the grace of letting go. The stream showed that trying prevents the natural flow you're trying to create. Each teaching, each story, each moment of recognition points toward the same understanding. You're already home. You've always been home. The journey was never about getting somewhere else. It was about recognizing where you've always been. As you settle now into this moment, you might let all the seeking dissolve. Let all the trying ease. Let all the questions about whether you're doing it right simply fall away like autumn leaves from a tree that knows its nature. You don't need to hold on to these teachings. They've already done their work simply by being heard. Like seeds planted in good soil, they'll grow in their own time, in their own way, without your effort to make them grow. What remains now is simple. You're here, breathing, aware. The day is complete. Tomorrow hasn't arrived. Everything that needed to happen has happened. Everything that needs to happen will happen in its own time. You can rest now. Not because you've finished everything. Not because you've achieved some special state. But because rest is your natural condition when you stop preventing it. Let your body settle into its support. Let your breath find its own rhythm. Let your mind be however it wants to be, busy or quiet, active or still. None of it needs to be different. The awareness that's been with you through all these stories, the one that's been listening and understanding, that awareness doesn't need to sleep. It's always here, always awake in its own way, always holding everything in its vast acceptance. You can rest in that awareness. You can let it hold you the way the earth holds the mountain, the way the lake holds the lotus, the way the sky holds the eagle. Completely, safely, with infinite patience. There's nowhere else you need to be. Nothing else you need to figure out. No problem that requires solving right now. Everything can wait until morning. Everything can rest. And in this rest, you join countless others who have discovered what these teachings point toward. The simple peace of being exactly what you are, exactly where you are, exactly as you are. May you rest deeply. May you wake refreshed. May you carry the peace you've touched here into whatever tomorrow brings. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Sleepy Monk.